chapter is to address the problem of excessive and improper influence. I continue to have a problem with that. I had a problem with that 2 years ago. Subsection B, subsection C, to prevent improper influence over elected officials. D, to prevent the appearance of improper influence over elected officials. E, to ensure that the individuals and interest groups continue to have a fair and equal opportunity to participate. As I stated, we have 11 or 12 candidates in 3 races right now. I don't think we're eliminating anybody. So as much as Supervisor Koufax has changed his vote, I'm going to change my vote and vote against this for the continuing concerns that I had 2 years ago and the concerns that I have just stated. So Supervisor Delbar.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll keep my comments brief. I guess after hearing folks speak, I have a much higher confidence and trust in the voters of this county. I don't think they're easily duped. And the thought that they could be bought off is a shameful thought that for those of people that really believe that. And I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. I think the timing of this item is suspect. And as Supervisor Pinches says, I also believe this is an infringement on freedom of speech, and it's an infringement on freedom of expression. And in a country that values its freedoms, I also am very shocked that this would be something we would be looking at. I do question the constitutionality of it. I'll respectfully disagree with counsel, because what these types of limits do, because we cannot put limits on the expenditures, it becomes a rich man's game. And that runs contrary to what some of the reasons behind this attempt is, and that is to give everybody an equal chance. And what we've done is you create a rich person's game to where the only ones that can afford to take that chance are the ones with their own personal resources, and I think that's a shame. Everybody, regardless of their resource level, ought to be able to run for office, so I will not be supporting this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Pinches.
Another issue in this, and I didn't want to get into the line items of this, but it's very discriminatory under this proposed ordinance here. It says that a district supervisor can't expend more than $30,000, but a countywide elected official can only spend $50,000. Now, it takes 5 supervisory districts to make up the county as a whole, so that's very discriminatory as far as raising money for a countywide election, because that should at least the limits of the countywide. If it's going to be $30,000 for a supervisor district, it should be at least $150,000 for the countywide. That would just be in fairness, because when you run for the countywide race, it's 5 times the area as a supervisor. So that's, to me, that's another area that's discriminatory. I mean, I made a whole lot of notes in this, but I don't really. I mean, there's a whole lot of reasons I'm opposed to this, but I just listed a couple of the top ones.
Thank you,
And again,
Supervisor.
those numbers were decided upon by the committee, and that's a voluntary expenditure provision.
Well, I think they use poor math.
Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you, Council. Further discussion by the board. Supervisor Colfax.
I think it's unfortunate that this looks like it will go down to defeat. There's no effort here to inject this into the current election cycle. Quite the contrary here. I found that some of my concerns here some years ago were perhaps overdone. But at the end of that campaign, I did have people raising questions about whether or not, because I was not restricted by this, I think I spent about $30,000, it's a matter of record, for a campaign, that somehow I had bought the election, which I found borderline absurd. But I would have been in a different position if I had spent twice or 3 times that amount. But my concern here is that we, by putting this out here, I think at least a minority of this board at this time may be expressing its concern. People who have spoken have expressed their concern. I really want to emphasize the one word in this whole document, and that 2 words actually. It's fair campaign, but then it's in parts in the first section there, Part B, it's excessive or improper influence, real or perceived. And the last thing this board needs to do is have the perception that elections are, in fact, shaped and candidates run or don't run because money somehow plays a role in it. And there are constitutional issues. I think they've been fairly addressed here, but I think it would be unfair to characterize this as allowing for rich people to become supportive. Not at this level. Rich people have better things to do than run for political office in Mendocino County, I suspect. But some of their supporters may have very good reasons to make sure that certain people are supported into office. So that argument here just doesn't stick. But I do say that I think we at least accomplished a couple of things the first round by getting some of this information put on the county website and making some of the reporting requirements a lot more transparent. So in that sense here, if we can just inch up to something that works just a little better, I guess that's what we'll have to live with until we, unfortunately, perhaps until we have a real crisis and then have to address it under circumstances that are far more onerous or far more destructive of the political process than is currently the case. I would like to see this come before us, and I sure as heck after the election we'll make another effort when the 1 year passes, and it probably won't be a whole lot different from that. Perhaps we'll get it by a year from now, and that'll be good enough. And I'll be up for re-election, and so will Mr. Pinches at that time.
Maybe.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do think that we had this at timing that before maybe some people didn't like and maybe some people don't like it now. So as the only person who's consistently, I guess, supported this, I think any timing is fine, because when you bring it forward, it's definitely a level playing field. Everyone involved with the election at the same time has to live by the same rules. The only section that they have an option on is the voluntary limitation, and they can do as they would like with that. So I'll continue to support this, and look forward to a day when we can bring it forward again. And I do think it has to do with the confidence of the electorate in the process, and as Supervisor Colfax said, the Section B in 8.100.010, where it talks about the real or perceived, and I do think that that's key. It's not to say people that raise significant dollars beyond what we're talking about here that there would necessarily be a problem, but I just think it is good to level the playing field, because there is the strong perception, I think, from the public that that money plays a role that is questionable at times in elections. And so if you can get people galvanized around a basic level of support and a basic leveling of the playing field, I think that's for the good. I think it will instill more confidence in elected officials, and it also gives that other option for the voluntary limitations, and it, in a sense, I think, because they exist, encourages individuals to sign on to that. So I look forward to the day that we can have reasonable ordinances put in place, such as this one. Thank you.
Thank you. There is a motion, a second before us. Would the clerk restate the motion, please?
Moved by Supervisor Pinches, seconded by Supervisor Delbar, to table the introduction and reading of the proposed fair campaign ordinance.
All right. Okay. Any additional discussion? Supervisor.
Well, yeah. On page 5 of this Section E, if this ever comes back before this board, that has to be changed, because there's no way that if somebody writes a person, a candidate, say from out of the county or in county, a check,